It's not about the client, it's really just about the message. And so the content is very important and the shapes are very important, and these need to correlate somehow.
Hello everybody, here is Mario and welcome to a new episode of Interview 10 Questions. Today my guest is Dafi Kühne. You can see him. He's a Swiss designer based between Glarus and Zurich. He's also famous for his technique to print poster manually, but also merging these digital and analog techniques. So this is how he gives amazing looks to his posters. You can see one behind me, actually. His posters are very famous also because they have been exhibited in around the world, and he also published a book which is True Print with Lars Muller's publisher. So welcome, Dafi. It's a really great honor to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
You are actually the first European that I'm talking with.
Ooh,
because I mean, Matteo,
a lot of pressure here.
Yeah. I mean, Matteo is from Italy, but he's based in New York, and Eric is as well in the US. So to be honest, I have to say that since I was studying in Basel, I always heard about you as a printer for unique techniques. So it's a kind of I'm really happy, let's say, to be here with you and have the possibility to interview.
Well, thank you.
So, as I always remember to all the interviewee, you are totally free to answer whatever you want. So just feel free and let's start.
Yeah.
With the first question, which is, what made you become a designer?
Well, I was not really aware that graphic design was a real discipline before I studied. I mean, I started with architecture just because I thought, well, that's something interesting and it sounds easy and it sounds like a lot of fun. I was a little immature at this time, and I'm like, okay, I started that, and I did this for a year, and I really liked the processes, and I realized the design is something that I'm really interested in. What I also realized is that with architecture, a project that is going on for 3 or 5 years is not even a big project yet. So I was scared off by that at that time. So I realized, or I was looking for other disciplines, and then I realized that probably in graphic design, you could do something that is much shorter with a similar process. And well, I found it in graphic design and in typography. And while I was switching, I first switched to interaction design, which is a complete digital discipline. Very different from what I'm doing right now, but I learned a lot there. And then I switched to visual communications and found my love to typography, basically, and to communicate through type. Okay,
so you kind of tasted a bit architecture and other discipline next to design. So what then is design for you? Because I think, as you said, you had the process from architecture and then you try a bit until you get here. So I think also the meaning of the discipline changed for you, maybe.
I still see many design disciplines, let's say fashion design, industrial design, architecture, graphic design. They're very closely related in the sense of design is a process. So it's not a given, a gift that you have and you're the creative. The creativity is a process. So in schools, we learn that process. We have these tools to generate ideas, and then we apply that in our job. So design is basically everywhere, but it can be very technical or it can be very expressive. And Well, depending on your interest and depending on your clients, you might do it a little different.
Yeah. So when I got in touch with you at the beginning, I was asking you, how should I define you to the audience? Are you a graphic designer? Are you a poster designer? So, and you said, just call me designer, because it's broader, and also, I mean, you you create posters, but I think as a poster to to say that you are a poster designer is not enough, because especially how you do your posters is really important. It's not just, as you told me, you just press command and P, sorry, but is something more. So what would you say when I ask you, what do you create as a designer?
Well, I try to deliver the whole thing, the final product. So I'm not just interested in the design process, because the technique that I'm working with is letterpress printing. And letterpress printing, you can't just design anything and then, well, we'll see how it works. You need to work with the restrictions that you get from these tools. So, but again, if I would call myself a letterpress printer, then a lot of people would have a different view on what a letterpress printer does. So I'm very careful with that. But you're absolutely right. In the context of graphic design, if I'm talking to other designers, I always have to tell them I'm also a printer. Let's say in the field of letterpress printing, I also have to tell them, but I'm also very much a designer. And I'm not saying they are not, but a designer in the sense of I try to make contemporary poster designs and not that much just playing around with the technique. And I really don't want to say like others don't do it that way, but if you look at my work, it doesn't look like traditional letterpress, and it does also not look like the most of the letterpress work that you find around. And therefore, even if you see my posters for the first time, you might not even know that they're letterpress printed. And that's totally fine for me. It's not that you need to know that my posters are letterpress printed. If the layouts don't work, if the way they strike you doesn't work, then there's no need to say these posters are letterpress printed. So I try not to justify the quality of my posters through letterpress. I try to push the quality of my posters through letterpress.
Okay, so I thought there is one artist, a painter actually, from Italy, that is Emilio Vedova, and he was like painting with all his body, basically. I mean, not that he was using the body, but he was like making these lines very strong with a lot of brushes, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So was very physical somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe also in your case is quite physical. I mean, I had the opportunity to talk with Maxime, who was my ex-classmate in Basel, and he also went to your summer workshop. And
Yeah.
he told me that they were really like using the body to make not just the print, but also what comes before, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
is there a kind of process that are you interested in while you are designing a project, when you start a project, or something else?
I try to be very careful not to have an idea set in my mind before I even know who my next client is. I think it would be wrong if I say like, okay, next thing I really want to do something with hand-carved linoleum blocks. And then the next client is a poster for classical music. And actually we should be talking about perfection. While if we say it's punk music, well, it's a different language, and I might be able to do both of it with linoleum, but I try not to have a preset idea in my head. I also try not to have a specific style. I mean, you could say, well, but your work is always very typographic. Okay, typography is my tool or my language, but I try to work for the client, or even better, for the cause, which is not the client exactly. I try to work for the punk show and not for the venue that might not be punk that much at all. So this is for me very important, that I have my bag of tools, and these are analog tools. These might be digital tools. It doesn't matter at all. And then I work for the client, and I try not to have too big of an ego, but I also try the client, so the clients don't have that big of an ego. It's not about the client, it's really just about the message. And so the content is very important, and the shapes are very important, and these need to correlate somehow.
Yeah. So at the beginning of the answer, you mentioned perfection. Mm-hmm. Do you think perfection exists in design?
Well, hard to say, but design is always kind of a compromise, isn't it? I mean, you have restrictions, you have freedom, maybe. You have given rules of typography, and you have the idea of breaking those rules. You have legibility versus expressive typography, or experimental typography, and you have content and form. I mean, you have so many different things that you have to find a good balance, and sometimes it's better to work just on the form, and other times it's better to work more with the content. And so many designers might have different solutions for the same project, and I'm not sure if there is a perfect solution. But for me, it's maybe the perfect symbiosis of content, form, message, and that message. So it's these factors that we have to calculate, and one designer would decide this, another designer might decide that, and both might be equally good. So I don't think there's a perfect solution, but there might be my perfect solution. That's the best I could give. I think that's as far as I can go with this question. Does that help?
Yeah, of course. Everything is help. So one thing that I really appreciate of your posters but all your works is that I really cannot say this is kind of contemporary design, this is from the past. I cannot give an age to a poster of you. So do you think you are a contemporary designer? What do you think about contemporary design especially? But where would you place yourself in a timeline?
Well, first of all, thank you, because I see this very much as a compliment. If I would just apply my personal style to any project, then I don't think I would be the best designer I could be. I would just do whatever I think is good, and I mean, that's what I do to a certain degree, but if I apply the same style to all the projects, that would not be fair to all my clients. So I think that is contemporary. It's serving the client, or it's serving the cause. If you say contemporary, you could say, well, my technique is absolutely not contemporary. I mean, what I do is not really, it's been around for a while. I try to combine the old technology with new tools, of course, so that is contemporary. I don't neglect the computer. I don't neglect new tools. I think this is great. I don't neglect contemporary even generative design or program design. I think this is very interesting. The only thing that I would criticize in this if you say contemporary design, because we see a lot of generative design today that are people that are programming layouts, and they're really, some of them are really interesting and great, but it always needs a person to make a selection and judge if this is good for the cause or if it's just nice to play around with. Imagine the opposite. If I was printing something with weird old type and it looks bad or it is not communicating clearly, then people would criticize me for saying, oh, you're an old romantic. You play around with these old tools and you love everything you produce. But today, I would criticize this with some of the digital design that is generated through programming, that it's interesting, but it's not, there's no selection of, no design selection happening, or at least there's no design selection that I would see with it. It's just interesting because it's interesting, or it's a new style that we haven't seen before, but if it doesn't fit the content, then it doesn't make sense to me. So for me, in design, or the content, something that does not change for me or has not changed in the last years is the content need to be reflected in the shapes somehow. If I'm talking punk, it looks different than if I'm talking classic music. And I could say, well, I make an ironic punk concert because it looks like classical music, but actually I'm saying punk. Okay, but somehow there is a connection there. And that for me makes contemporary design.
We talked earlier about your summer workshop, which I highly recommend to everyone. I hope you can do it this summer. We don't know, unfortunately, what is going to be, but of course, for you, education is important, because otherwise you wouldn't do it. So what do you think about the design education today?
I think design education, and not just today, should give the students a bag of tools, general interest, and a commitment to design in general. So, I mean, when I was a student, there was the discussion about Flash was starting. Flash was everywhere. It was a software that was used for so many animations and web pages. And there was this discussion, should we still learn Flash because it might be gone in 2 or 3 years? And it happened just when I graduated that I don't think the iPhones really supported Flash that much when they started. There was a way to show Flash, but they already said, oh, we don't need Flash anymore. But I don't feel any of what I've learned with Flash was not helpful for me. I think everything you do, I learned things that I can apply to different kinds of softwares, that I can apply to different kinds of tools. Because we cannot know if in 3 years Adobe will stop making those programs and we can't use them anymore, although most of the designers use them. So what do we do then? It's not a problem. Because if you can handle and go through a creative process with one tool, hopefully you can adapt for the future. And if you have a general interest in, I want to know how this works, I want to know what this looks like, could I improve that? If you have that general interest, you're not going to be lost ever, I hope. So I'm always impressed with older generation designers. If I talk to designers that are in their 70s, some of them are really still like young boys exploring things, and like, this is what I think you need to have, like having fun, commitment, being interested in finding the best solutions. If you have that in your bag of tricks, I think you can adapt for the future. And that's what we should teach the students. And that's what I'm also trying to teach in my summer program. Even the way we sit down on a Saturday evening and have a glass of wine for those who want, and eat Swiss cheese, and we talk, we listen, we appreciate each other's, and we have different opinions. And that's part of it. That's part of how we communicate, and part of the respect that we want to give each other's, but also towards our discipline.
Yeah, I think I understand and I got your point totally, especially because, as I mentioned before, I studied in Basel, and but before, during my bachelor, I also studied here in Italy. And one of the biggest difference I found is that in Switzerland, um, the school is not like you have to do this like this, but is more intuitive. So I led you to the point, asking you right questions, of course, but I will never tell you that is good, that is bad. So I think that's really important for what you said.
And I agree. I agree. There's just one exception that I'm really careful with. That I say there are, especially in typography, but also general ideas of design of optical rules. There are rules that are good to know. Just so you can break them, that's all good, but it's good to know the proper rules of typography, and that's what I also believe. So it's there in design education. There are some moments where the students just have to read a book or hear a lecture and take some notes to learn the rules. But then there are other moments where they have to find the solutions. I mean, that's just how you didactically work. If you teach a student, you want the students to find out solutions for themselves. So once you're gone or they are gone, they will have their ways to approach projects or problems, if you want so.
Earlier, you mentioned Flash, and also you said iPhone, so technology, and as well internet.
Mm-hmm.
I had a teacher when I was studying, and once he said, "I would like internet stops in a way to see who is a real designer." So, do you think it would be like this? I mean, I think it's really interesting to ask you because you, of course, you use technologies, computer and whatever, but at the end you work with analog tools, not just analog tools, but mainly probably.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's interesting your point of view, thinking about what
I mean, honestly,
what is the impact of internet on design?
well, honestly, if the internet was gone, I would be as lost as many other designers would be lost. I mean, as a tool of research, I have the book that has almost everything, but also you have to see the limits of the digital technology. So what is the internet good for? And it still doesn't design for you. It still doesn't generate good content for you. That's still, I hope, the work of people who do that. And that's the thing. I say a good designer can adapt to many different tools. And I hope to the skill set of a designer, I would say it might be good if you can trim down a piece of paper just with a ruler with right angles. It's a good skill set, but it's not a problem if you can't trim down a paper in a right angle. Well, you might not be the person who does the analog work that much. On the other hand, I think, well, it's pretty good if you can work in a typography layout program. It's pretty good if a designer can do that. It might be quite essential. I think today probably more essential than the analog skills, but I think you need a little bit of both. It's good if you can sketch something nicely, so a client will understand an idea while you explain it, you sketch something. It's a good skill to have, but it's not a problem if you're not good at sketching, but you need, I want to say, several of these skills you need to have. And the more the better, the broader you are. But I mean, for myself, I can say I am probably not such a good logo designer. I don't design logos. I'm not into that. I don't think I'm a good logo designer, but also I'm not interested in that too much. So you need to know your skills, but you also need to know where you're not that good. So not every designer can design everything. I mean, obviously. I think I'm probably pretty good at typographic layouts for posters, and especially in the connection with this old technology, letterpress printing, but also the connection with newer technology like laser cutters or whatever you can use to make these forms. And that's important to know, but I think I could adapt to different situations still.
Yeah. So another interesting thing connected to your way to design, your way to print, and what comes together is like that somehow you took something that was in the past and you brought in the present, you know. So, and it's working. I think it's really interesting that you find your way to work with this kind of technology, I would say, anyway. So you like try to see the role of the designer in the future, but still using old tools.
Right,
so
right.
What do you think about the future of for the role of the designer? Because now you're living the present, of course, but then what? Also looking around you.
I would probably go back to the point that we discussed before about design education. I mean, who knows what the future brings, especially in these days that it's mid-March 2020 and nobody in the world knows where we're going to be in a month or 2 months. It might be changing. It might go back to something that is quite the same as it was a month ago. So. And again, I say if we have the interest, if we are curious, I think we can adapt to these situations. So I think the role of the designer, you might work in a different field, but you might do a similar thing as a designer. You generate ideas, you generate maybe even content, and you bring it into a form, and so you have messages. I think it is also a chance right now that we reflect each person, because we don't know if the economy might be failing in a pretty broad range. So it might be a good situation for everyone to just think if what they are doing is the right thing. I mean, do I want to keep on going with what I'm doing right now for another 30 years? I'm 38 now, so I have to do this for at least another 30 years and maybe longer. Is this the right thing that I want to do? I don't know it for myself, but it might be the right moment to think about that. And so I want to see this moment also as a chance for everybody to think if this is the right thing to do, and if it's fair to everybody that I'm doing this. I mean, some companies do things that I think, oh, you might want to change, might make sense, but it's their decision.
Yeah, so we can also say that the designer role has to adapt to any kind of situation somehow.
Well, I think everybody needs to adapt to any situation right now. But I think as a designer, there will be also in the future, there will be projects where designers are needed 100%, and a good designer can work in different fields, I hope.
Yeah, sure. As you said, we are facing a really bad moment right now, and that's also why I started this project, to share some content. So what do you think the design world can do for this global pandemic? Do you think the designer has or could have a role in this moment? Also, if we are at home or we are staying, because in the previous 2 episodes, I had two different answers. One from Matteo, who was like, "Yeah, well, we cannot do so much. I mean, as a graphic designers." Instead, Eric was more like, "I think if we do something also small, maybe anyway, it will help somehow."
And I'm with Eric here. I mean, I think we can do as much as we can as designers, but it starts with how we talk to each other's, how we appreciate each other's work, how we treat each other's, and how we approach a design project. Is it just we do it for the money, or do we do the best that we think we can do? And to also, I mean, if would I do a poster for a political party that I dislike? No. Would I do a poster with a message that I think is weird and in a bad way? Like, no, I would not do that. And that's part of how we have an influence on what we design and how we design it. And you could say, well, you still need money. Of course I need money. That's my job. But I don't do just anything that people give me. I do what I think is, oh, this is a good project, and I think here I want to support that, and I want to improve the quality of this project. Even if it's just a concert, I say, well, this I think is good culture, and we should support that, and I should do a good poster for them. So I think designers can and should have a responsibility in anything we do, and design agencies that say, well, we just design whatever the clients give us. I think they're not taking their responsibility so serious. And I think, well, I don't think it's the right way to do. So I'm something that is also a different point here is I'm a bit scared at this point that what is going to happen to culture? I mean, we don't know it right now. Again, it's mid-March 2020. If you're watching this in the future, I don't know what it's going to be then, but I'm scared that the cultural field might suffer really, really a lot from that, because some people might think it's not necessary. And I hope it's the exact opposite. I hope there's going to be interesting projects from people that say like, hey, but we still need the culture. Also in times of a crisis, we still need good, honest design. We still need clever solutions. So that's what I'm hoping for. And I'm hoping that this is going to be a chance for everyone. That's all I could hope for.
Yeah, what you just said is true, and is as I said before, it's really bad what we are facing now. But I want to thank you, Dafi, because you are supporting this project that I launched last week, and it's really going well, and I'm really happy because a lot of designers like you are supporting and joining this idea. So thank you very much. I'm really happy to add you here in the interview.
Well, thank you a lot for this. I think that's exactly the way how design, if you want to call this a design project or not, but how we as designers can participate in what's going on and how we can improve what's going on by being flexible and super fast, developing a new project. And when you wrote me, I'm like, sure, this sounds super good. Exactly, that's what we need right now. We don't want to be locked up at home and just being bored and scared. I think it makes sense that we make good projects that are interesting for people and help each other to stay in a good mind at home while we're bored and in front of the internet. So thank you very much for this.